Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Poland's presidency of the Council of the European Union has started with some tension. Relations with Hungary have grown strained, highlighted by a diplomatic disagreement over Hungary's sheltering of a former Polish official facing legal charges. Meanwhile, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán is contending with rising political challenges at home. Joining us today on TVP World to unpack these developments is Roland Freudenstein, Brussels Office Director at the Free Russia Foundation. Sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Good evening.
So, in the most recent development, the Polish foreign minister have told the Hungarian ambassador that he is not welcome at the gala celebrating Poland's accession into the European Council presidency. Do you think this has more to do with the diplomatic spat between Poland and Hungary, or has more to do with how Hungary's been acting against the European Union during his presidency?
Well, I think both. Obviously, there is an acute crisis between Poland and Hungary, bilateral crisis, because of this political asylum story, which is ridiculous, really. Hungary really doesn't have to do this. They just want to make clear that they're very much opposed to Donald Tusk's government. Okay, but that's the current affairs aspect here, but there's a much deeper aspect. And for that, I think we have to see that Poland's government today and Viktor Orbán's government in Hungary are on two opposite sides in the European Union when it comes to relations with Russia, relations with China also, the role of the rule of law, the question, do you implement your national interest by cooperating with the other member states and the Brussels institutions, or do you do so by opposing them? And on all these questions, Poland and Hungary today are on very different sides. And so this statement by the Polish foreign minister also reflects basic disagreements about the future of Europe and the future of democracy that there are today, that exist today between Warsaw and Budapest.
Right, and speaking of Hungary's presidency, well, one of the biggest scandals perhaps is the fact that Orbán has went on his diplomatic offensive, so to speak, with the kind of guise of being the head of the European Council presidency. Do you think that has caused much damage, and what can Poland do to kind of change course from that?
Well, the Hungarian presidency was pretty much a disaster. Very few actual work got done, and instead, a tremendous amount of damage was done by precisely this trip that you mentioned by Viktor Orbán, which was not coordinated with anyone in Brussels or in other member state capitals. Going to Moscow, going to Beijing, going to Ankara and Washington, and kind of appearing like he was speaking for the European Union, because everyone knew that Hungary holds the Council presidency. But I mean, Mr. Orbán is not and was not the Council president. So, the first disaster here was a formal one, is that he seemed to be suggesting that he speaks for the EU. And what was even worse is what he seemed to communicate during these talks in these different cities, which is basically, advising Ukraine to give up and to surrender, and encouraging Russian aggression and encouraging autocracies around the world. So for all these reasons, little work got done, tremendous damage was caused by this trip. And that is why now the expectations, of course, are that Poland's presidency will be a much better one.
Right, and when it comes to Orbán's stance on Ukraine, Hungary has been seen as perhaps the black sheep of the European Union. But recently, we've seen that ever since the gas pipeline deal has expired, we've seen Slovakia also following suit. Do you think that these countries that have their energy tied too much to the Russian energy production is going to kind of stray towards that same direction?
Well, yes, Robert Fico from Slovakia is following in Orbán's footsteps in some respects, not in all. But when it comes to Russia policy, energy policy, there is definitely a complete lack of efforts to make their countries, their respective countries, independent of Russian energy. And then, these crocodile tears when Ukraine actually turns off the tap, which has been announced for a long time, actually, because Ukraine doesn't want to help countries to finance the Russian war effort against Ukraine. So, Hungary and Slovakia made no attempt to wean themselves off of Russian fossil energy. Other countries did that. Look at Germany, and look at our other Central European countries. But there is a price to be paid for this negligence, and I think we're now at a point where Viktor Orbán and Robert Fico are about to pay that price.
Right, and when it comes to the domestic aspect, a lot of people have been saying that Orbán has now finally faced a very strong contender, challenger in the form of Péter Magyar. Do you think that this perhaps is wishful thinking on a lot of people's part, or do you think that this is actually something that might challenge Orbán's position?
Péter Magyar is the most serious challenger to Orbán and his system of government inside Hungary. Ever since Orbán became prime minister in 2010. Now, that doesn't mean that he will automatically win the next election. And even if he does, Fidesz, Orbán's political party, which is also a movement and a power machine, has made sure that they still occupy so many positions of power in the judiciary, among big enterprises, in the police force and so on, that it will be difficult, even if Péter Magyar wins the next election, it will be difficult to actually purge Hungary of this autocratic regime that it has become under Viktor Orbán. But, I insist that this is the most serious challenge we've ever seen to Viktor Orbán's rule, and he will have to deal with it. He will have to deal with the discontent of Hungarians with the economy under Orbán, but also with corruption, nepotism, and with these constant fights that he picks with the EU institutions and with other member states.
All right, last but not least, real quick, do you think there's some point that Hungary will be brought back to the fold, or do you think this rift will continue to widen?
Oh, no, at some point the party is over. At some point, this autocratic regime will fall. Honestly, it cannot survive forever. Now, the question is, will it already collapse in the next 2 years, like in the next election, which is scheduled for 2026? That's an open question. We don't know. But at some point, this regime is over, and I'm very confident that it will be replaced by a government that is more cooperative and more democratic than Viktor Orbán's government.
All right. Thank you so much for your input and insight and helping us unpack the situation. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on TVP World. Cheers.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.